If you want to hear more stories, subscribe and enjoy the listening.
The first thing I noticed was that the printer was still warm. That shouldn't have been possible. It had been unplugged for almost 20 years. I knew that because I was the person who checked the wiring. The old machine sat in the corner of the weather station like a piece of equipment nobody had bothered to throw away. Dust covered the top. The plastic had yellowed with age. A handwritten label on the side still said, "Automated forecast output." A joke, basically. The station had moved to digital systems years ago. The printer was decoration, nothing more, until it printed my name. I was alone in the control room when it happened. No storm, no warning, no power surge, just the quiet hum of the observatory at 2:13 in the morning. The kind of silence you only get when you are hundreds of miles away from anything that matters. I was checking the overnight weather logs when I heard it. A mechanical click, then another. At first, I ignored it. Old buildings make noise. Pipes knock. Metal contracts. Machines wake up for no reason. You learn that when you work nights. Then I heard the paper move, slowly, one line at a time. I stopped typing. The keyboard light reflected off the window in front of me. Outside, the mountain was completely black. No road lights, no houses, nothing. Just my reflection staring back. I turned toward the printer. The paper was already halfway out. I walked over, not because I was brave, because I was annoyed. Something was my first reaction. Annoyance. I had spent 3 hours fixing a faulty humidity sensor, and now an ancient printer was deciding to become my problem. I grabbed the edge of the paper. The machine stopped. The room went quiet again. I looked down. The page was blank except for 3 lines. A name, a time, one word, Ethan Brooks, 2:27 a.m. Confirmed. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because my brain was searching for the obvious explanation. Someone was messing with me. A coworker. A damaged memory module. Some old automated system that had been triggered accidentally. Anything. Anything except what the paper seemed to be saying. I turned it over. Nothing. I held it under the desk lamp. No hidden ink. No printed message. Just my name. I checked the printer. The power cable was still disconnected. I followed it with my eyes. The plug wasn't even in the wall. I grabbed my radio. "Base, this is Ethan at Black Ridge. Static." I waited. "Anyone copy?" Nothing. I checked the channel. Correct frequency. I tried again. Still nothing. The mountain was known for interference. That was normal. I reminded myself of that. Normal. Everything had an explanation. That was the reason I took this job. Before Black Ridge, I repaired communication systems, military radios, emergency transmitters, remote equipment, broken things. I liked broken things. Broken things usually told you what was wrong. A loose connection, a damaged component, a failed circuit. Considering there was always a reason. People were harder. Machines were easier. That was why spending 6 weeks alone at a weather observatory didn't bother me. Most people would hate it. I didn't. A quiet room never lied to you. The printer clicked again. I froze. A second page started feeding. I hadn't touched anything. This time, I didn't walk over immediately. I watched. The paper came out inch by inch. When it stopped, I saw a different name. Not mine. Someone else's. Daniel Mercer, 2:27 a.m. Confirmed. I knew that name. Everyone at Black Ridge knew that name. Daniel Mercer was the technician who trained me, the man who had recommended me for the position, the man who disappeared 3 years earlier during a winter maintenance shift. The official report said he left the station during bad weather. Search teams found nothing. No body, No equipment, no explanation. Just an empty truck near the lower access road. Just I stared at the paper. The clock above the console showed 2:21 a.m. 6 minutes. I grabbed my jacket. The decision was automatic. Find the problem. That was what I did. The old tower, the wiring, the printer. Something was connected. Something was causing this. I didn't believe the paper. Not yet. But I believed enough to move, and that was the first mistake I made. The tower access door was frozen shut. It took both hands to force it open. Cold air rushed inside. The kind of cold that gets through your clothes before you even notice it. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The observatory lights disappeared behind me. The mountains swallowed them. The path to Tower B was only a few hundred yards. I knew the distance. I had walked it before, but that night, it felt longer. Halfway there, my radio turned on by itself. Static. Then a voice, weak, broken, like someone speaking through a damaged connection. Ethan. I stopped walking. The voice came again. Ethan. I lifted the radio. Daniel? Nothing. Only static. I looked back toward the observatory. The lights were still on. The tower stood ahead, dark, empty. My radio crackled one more time. This time, the voice was clearer, and it said something I still remember exactly. Don't check the printer. I reached Tower B at 2:26 a.m. The door was already open. I knew I had locked it earlier that day. I stood there with my hand on the handle. 1 minute left. 1 minute before the time printed on the page. Inside the tower, something moved. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Just the sound of paper sliding across a desk. I raised my flashlight. The beam entered the room. And on the old maintenance table, under a layer of dust, was a photograph. A photograph of the Black Ridge Observatory, taken years ago. A group of technicians stood outside. I recognized Daniel. I recognized Marla from administration. I recognized people whose names I had only seen on old documents. Then I noticed the person standing in the back. Then I didn't recognize. The one whose face had not been scratched out. Because there was nothing to scratch out. It was my face. The clock on my radio changed. 2:27 a.m. At the exact same moment, the printer in the observatory started running again. Even though I was standing 300 yards away, I heard the paper feed. I heard the rollers turn. And then my radio came alive. A different voice. Not Daniel's, not mine. A calm voice, almost bored. It said, "The observer has arrived." The radio went silent. And behind me, inside the locked tower, someone whispered, "You're late." 3 days earlier, I had never heard of Black Ridge. That is the part people always find strange. They think there must have been a warning, a feeling, some moment where I should have known something was wrong. There wasn't. The job looked normal. The place looked normal. Even the reason I accepted it was normal. I needed distance. Not from a person, not from some dramatic event, just from the noise. My apartment in Colorado Springs was small enough that I could hear my upstairs neighbor walking around every morning. Not talking, not playing music, just walking, back and forth, every day, same pattern, same time. It started bothering me more than it should have, because after years of repairing communication equipment, I had learned something. The worst sounds are not loud ones. The worst sounds are the ones you start expecting. A dripping pipe, a fan that almost stops spinning. A phone that never rings. Things that make you wait. I had spent most of my life fixing equipment in places nobody wanted to go. Remote towers, emergency stations, military communication sites. Places where if something broke, someone was usually already having a bad day. I was good at it. That was the problem. Being good at fixing things meant people kept sending me things that were already falling apart. The Black Ridge position came through a private contractor, night technician. Weather communications support. 6 weeks. Remote location. Extra pay. No unnecessary contact. The last part caught my attention. No unnecessary contact. It wasn't written like that in the job description, but that was what it meant. I would monitor the systems, check the instruments, report problems, then go back to my cabin. Simple, quiet, exactly what I wanted. During the interview, the supervisor barely asked about my experience. He already knew it. He spent more time talking about the station. Black Ridge is old, he said. How old? Older than it needs to be. I smiled. That's usually when things start breaking. He didn't smile back. That's why we need someone who knows what they're looking at. Something about the way he said it stayed with me. Not because it sounded threatening, because it sounded like advice. But the drive to Black Ridge took almost 5 hours. The last hour had no phone signal. The road narrowed. The trees got taller. The mountains blocked out everything except the road ahead. I remember checking my phone. No service. I wasn't surprised, but I still looked. That small movement people make when they know something won't work but try anyway. The observatory appeared near sunset, a concrete building sitting on the side of the mountain. Nothing dramatic, nothing abandoned, just old. The kind of old building that had been useful for so long nobody noticed it anymore. A radar tower rose behind it. A communication antenna stood beside it. A smaller structure sat farther away. Tower B. I would later learn nobody used it anymore. At the time, I just assumed it was storage. The first person I met was Marla Voss. She handled station records and administration. She was standing near the entrance with a clipboard. Late 40s, short gray hair, a jacket that looked older than mine. She looked at my truck, then at me. You Ethan Brooks? Depends who's asking. She looked back at the clipboard. That was almost funny. Almost? Almost. That was my first conversation at Black Ridge. Not exactly welcoming, but normal, and normal was good. She showed me around. The control room, the weather monitors, the communication equipment, the backup generators, everything worked, old but maintained. I noticed something strange though. There was a printer in the corner, an old thermal printer, the type used before everything became digital. I pointed at it. That still works? Marla looked over. For half a second, her expression changed. For not fear, not surprise, something closer to discomfort. Then it disappeared. Doesn't matter. I looked at it. Usually means it matters. She picked up her clipboard. You're here to monitor weather systems, Ethan, not old equipment. I smiled. Old equipment is usually where the problems hide. This time she didn't answer. Later that evening, I met Pete. Peter Lawson, maintenance assistant, younger than me, maybe late 20s, the kind of person who could make conversation with anyone. He was replacing a sensor outside when I arrived. First thing he said was, "You picked the worst week to start." I looked at the sky. Clear. Weather looks fine. That's why. I waited. We laughed. Relax. I'm joking. But he didn't look completely like he was joking. That first night was exactly what I expected. Quiet. Almost too quiet. I checked the instruments, updated the logs, tested communication equipment. Everything worked. At midnight, I made coffee. At 1, I checked the radar. At 2, I walked the building. Routine. Routine was good. Routine meant control. Around 2:15, I found something unusual. The weather monitor showed a pressure drop outside the normal range. Not dangerous, not impossible, just strange. I checked the sensor. No issue. Checked the connection. No issue. Checked the backup reading. Same result. The system was reporting a change that wasn't happening. I wrote it down. I remember thinking, old equipment, nothing more. Before leaving the control room, I noticed the printer again. Say the paper tray was empty. I was sure of that. I had seen it earlier, but now there was a single sheet sitting there. I picked it up. A weather report. No name, no warning, nothing strange. Just numbers, temperature, wind speed, pressure. I almost threw it away. Then I noticed the bottom line. A handwritten note, small, almost hidden. 3 words. Check the forecast. I looked around the room. Nobody was there. The cameras showed empty hallways. The radio was silent. I turned the page over. Nothing. No signature. No explanation. I told myself Pete was messing with me. That made sense. A bored maintenance guy at an isolated station. A harmless joke. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. I wasn't scared. Not yet. I was curious. There is a difference. The next morning, I asked Pete about it. He was replacing a broken panel near the generator room. Did you leave a note in the control room? He looked confused. What note? The printer. His expression changed slightly. What printer? I laughed. The old one. He stared at me. Ethan. What? That printer hasn't worked in years. I looked toward the control room. It printed a page. Pete wiped his hands on his jacket. No. Yes. He shook his head. I've been here 2 years. Okay. I've never seen that thing turn on. I waited for him to laugh. He didn't. That afternoon, I checked the printer. I unplugged it, opened the back panel. The inside was exactly what I expected. Dust, old wiring, stead components. Nothing connected. Nothing capable of printing. I stood there for a while. Then I closed it, because I had 2 options. Either someone was playing a joke, or something was happening that I didn't understand. I chose the first one. That was easier. That night, I stayed awake longer than usual. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted to catch whoever was doing it. At 2 a.m., I sat in the control room with a cup of coffee beside me. The building was quiet. The monitors glowed. The old printer sat in the corner, dead. I watched it for almost 20 minutes. Nothing happened. I almost felt stupid. Then the printer made a sound. 1 click, then another. I slowly put my coffee down. The machine was still unplugged. The paper tray was empty, but inside the printer, something moved. And this time, I was watching when the first line appeared. Daniel Mercer, 2:27 a.m. Confirmed. Signed. I didn't sleep after that. Not because I believed the paper. I want to make that clear. I didn't walk around Black Ridge thinking I had discovered something supernatural. That would have been easier. I would have had a simple problem, a strange machine, a strange event, something impossible. But impossible things are not where my mind goes first. My mind goes to wiring, programming, human error, someone changing something without telling me. Because machines don't make decisions, people do. At 2:28 a.m., I was still standing in front of the printer. The page was in my hand. Daniel Mercer, 2:27, confirmed. I checked the clock, 2:28. The time had already passed. Nothing happened. That was the first thing that made me relax. If the printer was some kind of prediction system, it was wrong. Daniel wasn't here. Nobody was here. No one had died. I actually felt embarrassed. I had spent the last 10 minutes staring at a piece of paper like it was a bomb. I folded it. Something put it beside the keyboard and went back to work. At 3 a.m., I checked the station cameras. Nothing unusual. The hallways were empty. The maintenance rooms were empty. The exterior cameras showed the same thing they always showed. Snow, trees, darkness, no people, no movement, no explanation. No exactly what I wanted. The next morning, I showed Pete the page. I didn't tell him about the voice on the radio. Not yet. Not yet. I wasn't even sure I believed that happened.
Tell me this is a joke.
Pete looked at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. That's not funny. I didn't say it was. Who printed it? That's the question. He rubbed his hand across his face. You printed it. I was here. So the printer was unplugged. Pete looked toward the control room. You're sure? I stared at him. I repair communication systems for a living. Right. He nodded slowly. Yeah, sorry. The apology bothered me more than if he had laughed. Because it meant he believed something was wrong. We tested the printer. That was the logical thing to do. Pete brought tools. I brought a meter. We opened the casing. Nothing. No hidden battery. No backup power. No connection. The machine was not broken. It was dead. A dead machine had somehow printed 2 pages. That was the fact. Everything else was a theory. Marla came in while we were working. She stopped when she saw the printer open. What are you doing? I looked up. Trying to figure out how this thing turned on. Her eyes moved to the paper beside me, the one with Daniel's name. She went still, only for a second. Most people wouldn't have noticed. I did, because noticing small changes was my job. What? She looked away. Where did you get that? From the printer? No. The way she said it was immediate. Not confusion, not disbelief, a correction. Like I had said something impossible. I picked up the page. Why is that hard to believe? She didn't answer. I followed her into the hallway. Marla. She kept walking. Marla, she stopped. What? You know something about this? No, too fast. Again, I noticed. You didn't ask what happened. Her face tightened. I know Daniel's name. Everyone here knows Daniel's name. Not like that. I waited. She looked at the paper, then back at me. Throw it away. I almost laughed. That's your advice? Yes. Why? Because some things are better left alone. That was not an answer. It was the kind of sentence people use when they already know the answer and don't want to say it. I spent the rest of the day trying to prove myself wrong. That sounds strange, but that's how my brain works. If something doesn't make sense, I don't immediately accept the impossible. I try to break the idea, find the mistake, find the missing piece. I checked the printer history. Nothing. Checked the network logs. Nothing. Checked the station records. Nothing. The machine had no reason to work, which meant someone had made it work. That was my explanation. Someone.
At 6:40 p.m., I found the first real clue. Not in the printer, not in the station, in the weather data. I was reviewing archived reports from the previous month when I noticed something strange. Every night, at exactly 2:27 a.m., the station recorded a minor communication error. Not a failure, an error. A small interruption, lasting between 8 and 12 seconds. Too short to trigger an alarm. Too consistent to be random. I checked the previous month. Same thing. The month before. 6 months. Same. Every night. 2:27. I called Pete. You ever notice the system dropping at 2:27? He was quiet. Why? Just answer. A pause. Yeah. I stopped typing. You knew? I thought it was a glitch. Why didn't you report it? Because it always fixed itself. That sentence bothered me. Always fixed itself. Machines don't fix themselves. People fix machines. That night, I stayed in the control room. I wanted to see it happen. Not because I was afraid. Because I needed proof. At 2:20, I had 3 monitors open. The printer sat across the room. The old clock above it moved normally. 2:21, 2:22, 2:23, nothing. 2:24. The radio lost 1 bar of signal. 2:25. The temperature display froze. 2:26. Every screen went black. Only for a second. Then, everything returned. Except the printer. It started moving. This time, I didn't walk toward it. I stayed where I was. The paper came out, slowly, quietly, almost politely. When it finished, I waited. 5 seconds. Then I crossed the room. The page was not a name, it was a weather report. I read it. Temperature, wind, pressure. Exactly what the system normally produced, except for one thing. The forecast time, 2:27 a.m. The predicted temperature was wrong, by 14 degrees. I smiled. Finally, a mistake. A normal mistake. The printer wasn't predicting deaths. It was printing corrupted data. A malfunction. A strange one, but still a malfunction. I almost felt relieved. Then I looked outside. The temperature sensor on the wall read, -14 degrees of Fahrenheit. The printer's forecast said, -14 degrees of Fahrenheit. The weather report wasn't wrong. It was showing the temperature before the sensor recorded it. I stopped smiling, because that changed everything. The printer wasn't guessing. It knew. Not much. Not yet, but enough. I picked up the page. At the bottom, below the weather information, a new line appeared. I was sure it wasn't there before. I watched the ink form, one letter at a time, like someone was typing from inside the machine. The message was short. 4 words. Daniel was not first. The printer clicked once, then stopped. And from the hallway behind me, someone knocked on the control room door. 3 slow knocks, the same rhythm, the same pause. Like whoever was outside knew exactly how long I would wait before answering.
I didn't answer the door. Not because I thought someone was outside, because I didn't know. That was worse. If it had been Pete, he would have called my radio. If it had been Marla, she would have knocked differently. Everyone at Black Ridge had a routine. The whole station ran on routines. That was how remote places worked. You learned the sounds. You learned the footsteps. You learned the difference between a person walking down the hall and a machine making noise. This was neither. The knocking came again. 3 times. Slow, patient. I reached for the radio. Pete? Nothing. I tried again. Marla? Static. The hallway camera showed the entrance. Empty. I switched cameras. Maintenance hall. Empty. Storage. Empty. Every camera showed the same thing. No one. I stood there for almost a minute, staring at the screen. Then I did what I always did when something didn't make sense. I checked the equipment. The door sensor was working. The camera was working. The radio was working. No errors. No damage. No explanation. That should have made me feel better. It didn't, because it meant the problem wasn't that the systems were broken. The systems were working perfectly. They were simply showing me something I couldn't explain. The next morning, I didn't tell Pete about the knocking. I wasn't hiding it. I just didn't know how to say it. Hey, the printer gave me a message, and someone knocked on a locked door even though the camera showed nobody there. That wasn't a conversation. That was how you got someone to start questioning your sleep schedule. Instead, I asked him something else. Who was Daniel Mercer? Pete looked up from his coffee. That's random. Answer. He leaned back. Why are you asking? Because everyone avoids talking about him. Pete was quiet. Then he shrugged. Daniel was good. Good how? Smart. Knew the station better than anyone. Then why did nobody replace him? Pete looked toward the window. The mountain was covered in low clouds. They tried. Who? 3 people. What happened? He took a drink. They didn't stay. That answer was too simple. What does that mean? It means they left. All 3? Pete nodded. 1 quit after 2 days, and the others, he looked at me. 1 wouldn't sleep. The room went quiet. And the last one? Pete looked away. He stopped talking about the station. That was not the answer I expected. I found Daniel's personnel file after lunch. Not because I was investigating. That's what I told myself. I was just curious. There is a difference. The file was in the old records room, a place that smelled like paper, dust, and old electronics. The kind of smell that makes you lower your voice without knowing why. I searched through the cabinets. Most files were normal. Maintenance reports, weather logs, equipment repairs. Then I found Daniel's folder. Thin, Too thin. A man who worked at Black Ridge for 9 years should have more paperwork. I opened it. Almost everything was missing. Training records, performance reviews, incident reports, gone. Only one page remained, his final assignment. Night technician, Black Ridge Observatory. At the bottom was a handwritten note, not typed, written in black ink. Do not reassign this position without approval. No signature, no explanation.
I read it twice.
Then I looked at the date. The note was written 3 years before Daniel disappeared. Someone knew something was wrong before he was gone. I went to find Marla. She was in the records office, exactly where I expected her to be. Experiences like Marla didn't disappear. They stayed near the information. What was Daniel investigating? She didn't look up.
I don't know.
You knew him, yes. You worked here when he disappeared, yes. You signed his assignment reports. Her pen stopped, only for a second, then continued.
I signed many reports, not many involving missing people. She put the pen down. What do you want, Ethan? I placed the file on the desk. I want to know why this warning exists. She looked at the page. Her face changed. Not much, but enough. You found that? Yes. Where? The records room. She looked at me. Nobody goes through those files. I do. Why? I almost answered. Because I need to know. But I stopped. Because that was becoming the problem. And Black Ridge seemed very willing to give me just enough to keep looking. Marla finally spoke. Daniel thought the station was recording something. Recording what? She shook her head. I don't know. You just said that. I said I don't know what he believed. That was different. What did he show you? Her eyes moved toward the window. He showed me numbers. What numbers? Times. My attention changed. What kind of times? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I went back to the control room. I pulled up the old weather records. Every night, 2:27 a.m. Every day, the same interruption. The same missing seconds. But now I looked closer. The errors weren't random. They were happening during something. A moment when every system briefly disconnected. A moment when the station was blind. Or maybe, a moment when something else could connect. At 2:27 that night, I waited. No coffee, no distractions. Just me and the monitors. 2:26:50, 2:26:55, 2:26:59. Then, every screen froze. The radio went silent. The printer activated. But this time, it didn't print a name. It printed coordinates. I grabbed the page. Numbers. Latitude, longitude. I entered them into the station map. The location appeared. Inside Black Ridge. Not outside. Not somewhere on the mountain. Inside the building. I zoomed in. The coordinates pointed to a place that wasn't listed on the map. A room. Below the observatory. There was no basement. At least not officially. The map showed ground floor, equipment level, storage. Nothing below. I compared the old plans. The original construction documents were different. There was another level. A section removed from every modern blueprint. A handwritten label marked the area. Level B. I printed the old map. The printer stopped. The room was silent. Then the radio turned on. Static. A voice. Weak. Almost gone. I grabbed it. Hello? Then. Ethan. I froze. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't the voice from before. It was me. My own voice. Older. Tired. Whispering through the radio. Do not open level B. The transmission cut. I stared at the map in my hand. Because someone had left a warning. Someone who knew I would find the door. And below the old blueprint, under the label Level B, someone had written a name. Not Daniel, not Marla.
I kept the map folded in my jacket pocket for the rest of the night. I didn't show it to Pete. I didn't show it to Marla. That might sound strange now, but at the time it felt like the only reasonable choice. Every time I brought someone else into the problem, it became more real, and I wasn't ready for that. Up until then, everything had still been something I could explain. A damaged system, a prank, a forgotten piece of equipment, a person trying to scare the new guy.
But a hidden level under the building. A voice that sounded like mine.
That was harder. So I did what I always did. I worked. The next morning, I went back to the original building plans, the ones from before the renovations. I checked every page. The basement level was there. Not a storage area, not a utility room, a full underground section, power connections, communication lines, emergency access. The strangest part was the date. The basement had been removed from the official plans in 1996.
No explanation.
No demolition record, just erased. A section of the building had been deleted on paper, but the building was still there. I found Pete near the generator room. He was replacing a fuse panel. Need a favor, he looked over. That usually means trouble. Can you help me check something? What kind of something? I handed him the old map. He unfolded it. The moment he saw the level B marking, his expression changed. Not fear, recognition. You know about this, he looked at me.
Who told you? Nobody.
That's not what I asked. I watched him carefully. You've seen this before. He didn't answer. That was enough. Pete. He put the map down. Ethan, you should let this go. That was the same sentence Marla had used. I felt something shift. Not fear, suspicion. You both say that because it's good advice. Why? He looked toward the hallway, then lowered his voice.
Because every person who starts
Looking for level B ends up asking the same questions. What questions? He looked at the map. Why it exists, and why it was closed, and he hesitated. Why people keep finding things down there. That was the first time someone admitted it. Not the printer, not the voices, not the missing records. The room. People had been there before. I folded the map. Who found it? Pete looked uncomfortable. Daniel. That knew he would say that.
and somehow hearing it still bothered me.
Daniel went down there? Yes. When? A week before he disappeared. What did he find? Pete shook his head. I don't know. You expect me to believe that? No. That answer surprised me. He looked at me. I expect you to understand that some things are easier not knowing. Later that day, I searched Daniel's old workstation. It was still in storage. Nobody had cleaned it out. That alone felt strange.
Most companies erase everything when someone leaves.
But Daniel's desk was exactly as it had been. Old coffee mug, toolbox,
Notebooks.
a person frozen in the middle of a normal day. The notebook was hidden beneath a stack of manuals. Most pages were normal. Maintenance notes, equipment problems, weather readings. Then the entries changed. January 12th, printer activated again. Same time, same pattern, turned the page. January 18th, Marla says it happened before. She won't explain. Another page, February 3rd, the names aren't predictions. I think they're records. I stopped. Records.
The same word from the voice recording.
I kept reading. February 10. The mistake is believing the machine knows the future. It knows what people choose. The next page was ripped out. Only a small piece remained. 3 words. Ethan will arrive. I sat there for a long time. The name bothered me more than anything else. Not because it was impossible, because it wasn't. Daniel had recommended me for the job. He knew I was coming. Maybe he wrote my name because he knew the next technician.
That was the explanation. A normal explanation. A thin one,
But still possible. I decided to confront Marla. This time, I brought the notebook. She was in the kitchen area making coffee. I placed it on the table. She looked at the cover. Her face changed immediately. Where did you get that? Daniel's desk. You shouldn't have. Why? She didn't answer. Why? She sat down. For a moment, she looked older than she had before. Not physically, just tired.
He was trying to prove something.
What?
That Black Ridge wasn't malfunctioning. I waited. He thought it was responding. To what? She looked at me.
People. That was the closest she had come to admitting anything. Marla, what is level B? She looked away. I don't know. You do. No. The answer came sharper, then softer. I know what Daniel believed was there. What did he believe? She was quiet.
Finally, he thought the station was watching. Before I could ask another question, the alarm sounded. Not the emergency alarm, a communication alert. Pete's voice came through the radio. Ethan, I grabbed it. What happened? Come to the control room. His voice sounded different. What is it? A pause. Then, just come here. The control room screens were frozen. Every monitor showed the same image, the weather radar. Then, except the radar wasn't showing weather, it showed the observatory.
From above. Like a satellite image. I stepped closer. Is this from one of our cameras? Pete shook his head. No. Then where is it coming from? Nobody answered, because the image changed. The observatory disappeared. The screen showed the parking lot, snow falling, the entrance door, and 3 people standing outside. I recognized myself, not immediately, because the image was distorted. But then I saw the jacket, my jacket, the same one I was wearing. The camera angle was impossible.
It showed the observatory from a place where no camera existed.
Pete moved closer. Is that you? I didn't answer, because there were 3 figures. One was me, one was Pete, and the third person was standing behind us. The image flickered, then cleared. The third person stepped forward. The face became visible. It was Daniel Mercer, but that wasn't what made me step back. It was the date in the corner of the screen, the recording timestamp. It wasn't from the past.
6. It wasn't from the future.
It was happening now. The control room door opened behind us. All 3 of us turned. Nobody was there, but on the floor was a fresh sheet of paper, warm from the printer. I picked it up. This time, Pete saw it, Marla saw it, everyone saw it. No explanation, no doubt. The paper had one line, a name, Peter Lawson, and beneath it, 2:27 a.m. Pete looked at the clock. It was 2:26. He slowly looked at me. Ethan. The printer clicked again.
Another page started printing. And this time, we were all standing there watching. Somebody touched the second page.
That was the first thing we agreed on. No one said it out loud. Nobody needed to. The 3 of us just stood there watching the printer work. The machine that wasn't supposed to work. The machine that had already printed names nobody wanted to see. The machine that had just printed Pete's. The paper moved forward. A few inches, stopped, moved again. Like it was taking its time. Like it knew we were watching. Pete stepped away first. No, his voice was quiet.
Something random leap. Not anger.
Just refusal. He looked at me. Tell me this is some kind of trick. I wanted to. I really did. Because I needed that answer too. I checked the printer, the cable, the power, the connections. Same as before. Nothing. A dead machine. A living result. I had no explanation. And for the first time since arriving at Black Ridge, I stopped looking for one. The page finished printing. I picked it up. My hands were steady. That surprised me.
The first time I saw my name, I froze.
The second time, I investigated. This time, I was tired. The paper contained Pete's name, the time, 2:27 a.m. Nothing else. I looked at the clock, 2:26, 30 seconds left. Pete looked toward the exit. I'm going outside. Marla immediately shook her head. No. Why? Because that's what it wants. Nobody spoke. Pete stared at her. What does that mean? She didn't answer. He laughed once, not because anything was funny, because he was overwhelmed.
Everyone here keeps saying things like that. He pointed at the printer. Nobody explains anything. Then he looked at me. You know what the worst part is? I waited. I believe you. That was the moment everything changed. Not when the printer activated, not when we saw impossible recordings, not when I heard my own voice. That was the moment the mystery stopped belonging to me. Because Pete had seen it, Marla had seen it. Whatever was happening at Black Ridge was no longer something I was carrying alone. At 2:27 a.m., nothing happened. No accident, no death, no emergency. Pete was standing right in front of us, alive, breathing. The printer had been wrong, again. For a few seconds, that felt like good news. Then Pete's radio turned on. Then a weather alert played. Not from the station, from somewhere else. A recording, old, distorted, a man's voice. Observation window complete, then static. Then another sentence. Subject remains active. The radio shut off. Pete looked at me. Subject? Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. The next morning, we went into the archives. Not because we wanted to, because we needed information. Because the official records weren't enough. Too many missing pieces. Too many people avoiding questions. The old archive room was beneath the east side of the station, a place that smelled like paper and metal. Marla unlocked the cabinets. I noticed something. She didn't hesitate. She knew exactly where to go. You've been here before. She didn't deny it. Yes. Looking for what? Answers. Did you find them? She looked at the shelves. No. The first folder was from 1971, the first year Black Ridge officially opened. Inside were construction reports, weather logs, personnel files, normal documents, until the last page. A handwritten incident report, no computer formatting, no official stamp, just a few sentences. At 2:27 a.m., all communication systems failed for 11 seconds. Upon restoration, automated printer produced unauthorized report. Report contained future weather conditions. No explanation found. Say, I looked at Marla. 1971? She nodded. The printer was here from the beginning. The second folder was from 1985. Same event, different technician, same time, 2:27. The third was from 1999. Same. The fourth was from 2016. Same. Different people, different years, same 11 seconds. Then we found the photographs. They were stored separately, not filed, hidden. That bothered me more. Someone had wanted them kept away. The first photograph showed the original construction crew. The 20 people outside the observatory. Nothing unusual. Until I noticed the background. The old radar tower, the building, and a door. A small metal door on the lower side of the mountain. A door that did not exist on the current building. The next photograph was from 1974. A technician standing beside the printer. The same printer, but newer. The caption underneath read, Thomas Vane, first observer. I looked at Marla. Observer? She stayed silent. I opened another file. Inside were audio transcripts. The recordings themselves were missing. Only transcripts remained. The first one, recording 03, technician Thomas Vane, time 2:27 a.m. Another name printed, pause. I thought it was a warning, pause. It's not. Long pause. It's a record. I looked up, the same realization. Different person. Weather date from back then seemed to be breached inside the chemical. The final file was the oldest. No date, no author, just a map. A map of the mountain before Black Ridge Observatory was built. There was a circle drawn beneath the location of the station. A handwritten note beside it.
Do not build above the observation point. I stared at the words, observation point, not weather station, not communication station, observation point. The station wasn't built to watch the mountain. It was built because something was already being watched. Pete found something else, something which had an integral impact on the concrete floor. A small cassette tape, the code hidden way back beneath the station. No label, no date, just one word written on the side. Mercer Daniel. I grabbed it. Do we have a player? Marla nodded. There is one in storage. The tape player took 3 attempts to start. The first 2 times, nothing happened. The third time, the speakers crackled. Then Daniel's voice, weak, tired, like he hadn't slept in days. If you're listening to this, a pause. Then Ethan found the records. I looked at Marla. She looked at me. The tape continued. Don't trust the reports, static. Don't trust the forecasts, more static. Then Daniel said something that made all 3 of us freeze. Most importantly, a long pause. Don't trust the person who tells you they understand it. The tape clicked. Then another voice appeared, a voice I recognized. Then my own, older, the same voice from the radio. Ethan. The room went silent. The recording continued. You need to know the truth before Marla tells you hers. The tape ended. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Because the problem had changed. Before, we were trying to understand the printer. Now there was something else. Someone had been controlling information. Someone had been hiding the truth. And according to the recording, that person was standing in the room with us. Marla slowly looked at the cassette, then at me. I can explain. I didn't answer, because behind her, on the archive shelf, a photograph had changed. A photograph that had shown 3 technicians outside Black Ridge now showed 4, and the 4th person was me. For about 10 minutes, I believed we had solved it. That is the dangerous part about mysteries. Sometimes the wrong answer feels better than no answer at all. A wrong answer gives you somewhere to stand. It gives you rules. It gives you control. And after everything that happened at Black Ridge, I wanted control more than anything. Marla took us back to the control room. Nobody spoke during the walk. The station felt different. Same hallway, same lights, same old concrete walls. But now every corner felt like it was hiding something. That was the problem with learning a place had secrets. You stopped seeing the building. You started seeing what it could hide. Inside the control room, Marla closed the door. Daniel shouldn't have left that tape. Pete laughed quietly. You mean Daniel shouldn't have left proof? She looked at him. Peter, no. His voice changed. The friendly tone was gone. You don't get to do that. Do what? Act like we're confused. He pointed toward the printer. You knew. Marla didn't answer. You knew this thing existed. Silence. You knew Daniel was looking into it. Silence. You knew people were disappearing. Marla looked down. I knew enough. That was not what I expected, because I was waiting for a denial, a lie, something easy. Instead, she admitted it. Then tell us. Marla sat down. For the first time since I met her, she looked exhausted. Not tired. Exhausted. Like she had been carrying something heavy for years. Black Ridge wasn't always a weather station. Pete crossed his arms. What was it? A research site. For what? She looked at the printer. Pattern observation. I frowned. Patterns? Communication patterns. Weather patterns. Human behavior. I shook my head. That doesn't explain the printer. No. She looked at me. It explains why it was created. According to Marla, the printer was part of an old experiment. Nothing supernatural. Nothing impossible. At least not originally. In the 1970s, researchers were studying whether complex systems could detect events before they happened, not predict the future. detect patterns, a storm before the instruments noticed, a failure before equipment broke, a problem before humans recognized it. The printer was connected to every system in the station: weather, power, communications, personnel reports, everything. It collected information, thousands of small details. Then it created reports. I listened, because it made sense. That was the terrifying part. It actually made sense. A machine analyzing data, finding patterns, predicting outcomes. That was possible. The names were harder, but maybe they weren't deaths. Maybe they were incidents. Maybe the system was calculating risks. Maybe Daniel had misunderstood. Maybe we all had. So the printer isn't predicting death. Marla shook her head. No, she looked at the paper with Pete's name. It records decisions. I waited. What does that mean? It means the event happens because someone follows the information. I looked at Pete. You're saying the printer doesn't predict what happens. No. Marla's voice dropped. It influences what happens. The room went quiet. That explanation was worse, because it meant the printer wasn't a warning. It was a trap. It thought about Daniel, his name, the page, the time. The fact that nothing happened. Maybe because we knew. Maybe because we changed something. The printer didn't know the future. It created possibilities, and people completed them. I looked at Marla. How long have you known? She didn't answer immediately. Since before Daniel disappeared. Pete shook his head. You let him go down there. I tried to stop him. Did you? She looked away. That was an answer.
The explanation continued. The first observers were technicians assigned to monitor the system. They noticed the printer outputs. They investigated. They changed things. And every time they interfered, the system adapted. It learned. That word bothered me. Learned? Marla looked at me. That's what Daniel believed. Do you believe it? She didn't respond. I wanted to believe this was the answer. A machine, an experiment, a failed project, something created by humans. Rules could be understood. Rules could be broken. That was how I survived difficult jobs. Find a problem, find a solution, move on. That afternoon, I tested the theory. I went back through the records. Every printed name, every event, every outcome. I looked for patterns, and I found one. The printer never printed someone who had no connection to the station. Everyone on the list had one thing in common. They had interacted with Black Ridge. Technicians, researchers, maintenance workers, observers, people who looked closer, people who wanted answers. The fear changed. It wasn't about dying, not anymore. It was about being noticed. Pete found me at the computer. You believe her? I didn't look away from the screen. I believe parts of it. Which parts? That someone built this. And the rest? I closed the file. The rest depends on what happens next. That night, the printer stayed silent. No names, no messages, nothing. For the first time in days, Black Ridge felt normal. Almost peaceful. I almost relaxed. Almost. At 11:45 p.m., I found the old research files. The ones Marla hadn't shown us. They were hidden behind the archive cabinet. Not locked, just placed where nobody would look. Inside was the original project name. Not Black Ridge, not weather research. Something else. A title stamped across the first page. Project Horizon. I read through the documents. Most were technical. Data collection, prediction models, communication studies. Then I found a page marked confidential. The handwriting was different, not typed. Someone had added a note later. One sentence. The system does not predict events. It identifies the most likely observer. I read it again. Slowly. The most likely observer. Not victim, not technician. Observer. Then I found the final page, the page that made every explanation fall apart. It was a personnel list. Every observer assigned to Black Ridge. Every date. Every replacement. At the bottom was the newest entry. The newest observer. The person assigned after Daniel Mercer. The person who had not yet started. The person whose start date was tomorrow. My name was already there. But that wasn't the part that made me step away from the desk. The signature at the bottom belonged to me. My handwriting, my signature, dated 6 months in the future. I stood alone in the archive room, holding a document I had supposedly written. And for the first time, the explanation that made sense stopped making sense. Because the printer wasn't predicting my future. It was showing me something worse. A future where I had already made the choice. I spent the next hour trying to prove the document was fake. That was my first instinct. Not fear, not panic, verification. The same way I would test a damaged transmitter. Start with the obvious. Find the mistake. The signature was mine. I knew that immediately. Not because it looked similar, because it was mine. My last name had the same small mistake I always made. The curve at the end of the S dragged too far. A stranger copying my signature might copy the shape. They wouldn't copy the mistake. I checked the paper, the ink, the age, the document format, everything. The page looked old, older than it should have, but the signature looked fresh, like it had been added recently. That should have been impossible. Everything about Black Ridge was becoming a collection of impossible things. I took the document to Marla. She was still in the control room. She looked at my face before she looked at the paper. What happened? I placed it on the desk. Where did this come from? She read it. Her expression changed. Not surprise, recognition. You found it. You knew. I knew there were records. You knew my name was in them? She didn't answer. That was enough. You brought me here. The words came out before I had time to think about them. No. Then why was my name in a document written before I arrived? I don't know. You keep saying that. Because sometimes I don't. I stared at her. For the first time, I saw something different. Not secrecy, guilt. Tell me the truth. She looked toward the printer. Daniel thought the system was choosing people. Choosing them for what? She didn't answer. Marla, her voice dropped. To continue. That was the word she used. Not work, not investigate. Continue. Like the station was not a place. Like it was a process. I found Pete near the entrance. He was packing a bag. I stopped. What are you doing? He didn't look up. I'm leaving. You can't. He laughed. Why? Because the road is dangerous. He looked at me. The road? Then he pointed toward the building. Ethan, there is a machine inside this place that prints people's names before something happens. He zipped his bag. The road is not the thing I'm worried about. Because I felt the same thing. The safest place to be was not outside. The safest place was somewhere far away from the printer. But that was the problem. The printer had already found us. Pete reached the door. The moment his hand touched the handle, every light in the building turned off. No warning, no flicker, complete darkness. The emergency lights should have activated. They didn't. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the radio on Pete's belt turned on. Not static. Clear. A man's voice. Daniel, don't let him leave. Pete froze. I looked at Marla. She looked terrified. Actually terrified. Not uncomfortable, not guarded, terrified. Because she knew that voice. The emergency lights finally came on. Pete was still holding the door. But he wasn't looking outside. He was looking down, at the floor. A piece of paper had been pushed underneath the door, from the outside. I walked toward it. Pete stepped back. The printer hadn't printed it. Not this time. The page had only one sentence. The first observer always tries to escape. Nobody spoke, because we all understood the implication. This had happened before. Not once, many times. Different people, same decisions, same reactions, same mistakes. Pete slowly shook his head. No. I looked at him. What? No. He stepped away. I'm not doing this. Nobody stopped him. Nobody could. Because suddenly I understood something. The printer didn't need to force anyone. It didn't need to lock doors. It didn't need to chase people. It only needed to show them enough information. People would make the rest happen themselves. That night, I went back through Daniel's files. I looked for one thing. A mistake. Something everyone missed. I found it at 3:17 a.m. A small audio file hidden inside an old weather report. The file name was Observer Final. I played it, At first, only static. Then, Daniel. Recording this because I don't think I'll get another chance. A pause. If Ethan is hearing this, my hand tightened around the mouse. Then the system was right. I stopped breathing for a second. Daniel continued. It doesn't choose the person who will discover it. It chooses the person who will protect it. The recording continued. That's the part nobody understands. A long pause. The observer isn't trapped here. Daniel's voice became quieter. The observer keeps it alive. The file ended. I sat there staring at the screen, because every theory I had built collapsed. The printer wasn't a warning system. It wasn't a broken experiment. It wasn't predicting accidents. It was looking for someone. Someone who would take over. I found Marla in the hallway. How many observers were there? She stopped walking. I don't know. Yes, you do. She closed her eyes. 7. 7 people? She nodded. Before Daniel. I looked toward the control room. And what happened to them? Her answer came quietly. They all tried to leave. And? She looked at me. Only one did. That answer bothered me. Who? She didn't respond. Marla. She looked past me, toward the dark hallway leading to the lower levels. The first one. Thomas Vane? She nodded. But he didn't leave. I waited. He went somewhere else. The building temperature dropped. Not slowly, instantly. The kind of cold that makes you notice your own breath. The printer in the control room activated. Nobody was near it. No one moved. A page began printing. I walked toward it. Not because I wanted to, because by then, I understood something. The station was not hiding information anymore. It was giving it. The page finished. I picked it up. No name, no time. Just a message. 3 lines. Observer transfer complete. Previous observer released. Thank you, Ethan. I read it twice. Then I noticed the last line. The ink was different. Newer. Still wet. Someone had written it after the printer finished. A handwriting I recognized. Mine. Below the message were 4 words. You will understand soon. The control room door closed behind me. Locked. From the outside. And through the glass window, I saw Pete and Marla standing in the hallway. They weren't looking at me. They were looking behind me. Slowly, I turned around. The printer was still running, but it wasn't printing paper. It was printing a photograph. And when the image finished developing, I saw myself standing inside level B, looking directly at the camera.
The first thing I did was try the door. Not because I thought it would open, because I needed to do something. Anything. A locked door is a simple problem. You pull the handle, you check the lock, you find another way out. Simple. That was comforting. For a few seconds, I could pretend I was dealing with a normal situation. The handle didn't move. I tried again. Harder. Nothing. Ethan, Pete's voice came through the glass. I turned. He was standing on the other side of the door. Open it. I can't. His face changed. What do you mean you can't? I pulled the handle again. Try the other side. He grabbed the handle. It moved. The door opened immediately. I stepped out. Nobody said anything, because that was worse than if it had stayed locked. The station had not trapped me. It had only made me think it did. I looked back at the control room. The photograph was still sitting beside the printer. The image of me inside level B. I picked it up. The paper was ordinary. That bothered me. After everything else, I expected something strange. A symbol, a hidden message, something impossible. Instead, it was just a photograph. A normal photograph of an impossible place. Pete looked at it. That's you? I nodded. When? I don't know. Are you sure it's you? I looked at the picture again. The jacket, the flashlight, the way I was standing. Everything. Yes, Pete swallowed. Then what does that mean? I didn't answer. Because I already knew the answer I was avoiding. It meant I was going downstairs. Marla watched me. No. I looked at her. No? You're doing exactly what everyone else did. Everyone else? She nodded. The moment they saw proof, they went looking for the source. Wouldn't you? Her silence answered. I wanted to ask her something simple. Why didn't you tell me? But I already knew. because if she had told me before I arrived, I never would have come.
And that was the part that bothered me most. Not the printer, not the hidden room, not the impossible photograph. The job. The reason I was there. I went back to my office. I opened the original employment email. I wanted to see it again. The first message, the one that brought me here. The position had been sent through the contractor. Night technician, 6 weeks, remote location. I searched for the sender. Nothing. No email address. No company signature. Just a blank field. That was impossible. Every message had a source. Every system had a trail. I checked the metadata. The message had been created 3 months before I received it. 3 months before I started looking for work. I sat there, staring at the screen, because that changed something. Before, I thought I found Black Ridge. Now, I wasn't sure. Maybe Black Ridge found me. I searched deeper. The file attached to the job offer contained my resume, my full work history, my certifications, everything.
Say something random, but one detail was wrong. My current address. The one listed was my old apartment. The apartment I had moved out of 2 years earlier. Nobody should have had that information. Nobody except me. Nobody. I closed the computer. The room felt smaller. Not physically, just mentally. Every answer created a bigger question. That evening, Pete packed again. This time, I didn't stop him. You leaving? He nodded. Yeah. Where? Anywhere. I understood. He wasn't looking for a destination. Charismatic Bruce, he was looking for distance. Pete, he stopped. If you leave, what happens? He looked at me. What do you mean? The printer. His expression changed, because neither of us had considered that. The printer was connected to people at the station, not just the building. If Pete left, would it follow him? Would it print somewhere else? Would someone else become involved? A small sound came from the control room. The printer. Again. Nobody moved. Then Pete laughed quietly, not happily. You know what's funny? What? I spent 2 years fixing broken equipment here. He looked toward the control room.
I never thought the equipment was the problem. The new page was waiting. This time, nobody wanted to read it. I did anyway. It was not a name. It was a report. A communication log. The station had recorded a radio transmission. The date was tomorrow. The sender, Ethan Brooks. The receiver, Peter Lawson. Pete looked at me. What is that? I kept reading. The message was short. Only one sentence. Do not let Ethan enter level B. Nobody spoke, because the message wasn't from Daniel. It wasn't from the station. It was from me. Pete stepped away. Okay. I looked at him. Pete. No. He shook his head. Don't. Don't what? Don't explain. I wasn't going to. Good. He grabbed his jacket. Because I don't think I want to hear the explanation. For the first time since arriving at Black Ridge, I understood what the printer was doing. It wasn't showing us events. It was creating conflicts. Giving people information they couldn't ignore. Making them choose. And every choice changed what came next. That night, communication with the outside world failed completely. Not interference. Not a weak signal. Everything. The satellite connection, the emergency transmitter, the backup radio, all dead. I checked every system. No damage, no errors, the equipment worked, it just couldn't reach anyone. The next morning, Pete tried the road. The truck started, the engine worked, the fuel was full. Everything was fine. Except, the road camera showed something impossible. The road out of Black Ridge was gone. Not blocked, not damaged, gone. The camera showed the mountain path, then trees, then snow. No road. Pete stared at the screen. That's not possible. I didn't answer, because he was right. We checked the outside cameras. Every camera showed the same thing. The station existed, the mountain existed, but the road leading away did not. Marla looked at the screen. I've never seen that before. I turned toward her. Never? She shook her head. No. That was the first honest answer she had given me all day. At 2:27 that night, the printer activated again. This time, we were waiting. All three of us. The paper came out. I picked it up. It was a list. 7 names. The previous observers. Every person who had worked at Black Ridge. Every person who disappeared. At the bottom was the final entry. A blank space. Waiting. A second page. I watched it appear. Slowly. The first line printed. Observer replacement window, open. The second line appeared. Current observer, Ethan Brooks. The third line appeared, and this time, I felt my hand tighten around the paper. Because it wasn't my name, it was Pete's. Next observer, Peter Lawson. Pete took one step backward. No. The lights above us flickered. The radio turned on. A voice came through. My voice. Older. Don't let him take your place. Then the generator shut down. And somewhere below us, behind a door that officially didn't exist, something heavy unlocked.
The generator shutting down was not the worst part. A power failure at Black Ridge was something I understood. Old systems failed. Backup systems failed. Backup systems failed. Cold weather damaged equipment. That was normal. Normal problems had solutions. The problem was what happened after. The building did not become quiet. It became aware. Every emergency light should have turned on. They didn't. The entire station went dark. Not the kind of darkness you get when a room loses power. A different kind. A complete darkness where you lose your sense of distance. Your eyes search for something familiar. A wall, a doorway, a piece of furniture, anything, but there was nothing. Ethan, Pete's voice came from somewhere near me. I'm here, don't move. I stopped. Why? A pause, because I don't know where you are. That sentence stayed with me, because we were standing in the same room, a room we both knew, a room we had walked through dozens of times, but in that darkness it felt unfamiliar. I reached into my pocket for my flashlight. The beam came on. For a second, I felt relief. Then I pointed it forward. The control room wasn't the same. Not exactly. The desks were still there, the monitors, the printer, but something was wrong. The room looked older. The walls had stains that weren't there before. The equipment looked like it belonged to another decade. I lowered the flashlight, then raised it again. The room was normal. Did you see that? Pete was beside me now. See what? He looked around. Nothing. I almost said it. I almost told him. But I stopped, because I didn't know if I saw anything, and I was tired of being the person who noticed things nobody else could see. We checked the generator room. The door was open. That was unusual. I had locked it earlier. Inside, the generator was running, slowly, normally. The shutdown had lasted exactly 11 seconds, the same length as the communication failures, the same length as every 227 event. I checked the logs. The system had recorded the failure, but the cause field was different. Instead of power interruption, it said observer interruption. I stared at the screen. Pete read it over my shoulder. What does that mean? I shook my head. I don't know. The words felt strange coming from me. A few days earlier, I would have hated that answer. Now it was becoming the only honest one. Now it was back upstairs. Marla was standing in the hallway, holding something. A key, old, rusty. I looked at it. Where did you get that? She looked toward the floor. The door opened. What door? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. We all knew. The entrance to level B was behind the old equipment storage room, a place nobody used, a place that officially didn't exist. The door was there now, not hidden, not locked, just waiting. Pete stared at it. This wasn't here before. I looked at Marla. She didn't deny it. No. When did you know about this? I didn't. You said you knew the station. I know what it used to be. She looked at the door. I don't know what it is now. That was the first time Marla admitted she was afraid. Not with words, with her hands. She was holding the key so tightly her fingers had gone pale. I should have opened the door. That was what the old photograph showed. Me inside level B. That was what the printer expected. But the radio message stopped me. My own voice. Don't let him take your place. I looked at Pete. He looked at me. Neither of us trusted the other anymore. That was the new problem. The station had done something worse than trap us. It had turned us against each other. Pete took a step back. I need to know something. What? If you go down there, he looked at the door. What happens to me? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. But I knew what the printer wanted. It wanted a replacement.
Marla interrupted. Neither of you understand. We looked at her. The observer isn't chosen because they are special. Then why? Because they are willing. That made no sense. Willing to do what? She looked at the printer through the window. To stay. The level B door unlocked. The sound traveled through the building. A heavy metal mechanism. Old, unused, but still working. Nobody moved. Then the door opened by itself. A small gap. Cold air came through. Not outside air. Something different. The smell was the first thing I noticed. Dust, metal, and something else. A smell I couldn't place, like an old room that had been closed for years. My flashlight pointed through the opening. A staircase, going down. The walls were covered in writing. Not graffiti. Notes. Hundreds of them. Dates, names, warnings. Pete stepped closer. Those weren't there before. I looked at Marla. She shook her head. No. I moved the flashlight across the wall. The oldest writing was near the top. The newest was near the bottom. Someone had been adding messages over decades. Then I saw one written in fresh black ink, still wet. My name. Ethan Brooks, you are not the first to read this. Below it was another sentence. Different handwriting. Older, rougher. But you are the first to know why. The radio on my belt turned on. Static. Then a voice. Daniel. Barely audible. Do not go down there. I grabbed the radio. Daniel? Silence. Then, because if you see what is below. A pause. Long enough that I thought the transmission ended. Then he finished. You will understand why nobody leaves. The radio died. Pete looked at the staircase. We don't go down there. For once, I agreed. We stepped away. One step, two, again. The page came out. No name, no time, no warning, just one sentence. Level B is not below the station. I looked at the words, then at the staircase. My stomach dropped. Because I understood what the sentence meant. The room wasn't beneath us. The room was somewhere else. Somewhere the station connected to. The second line printed, the station is above level B. The third line appeared, slowly, like the machine wanted us to watch. You have never been inside Black Ridge. The printer stopped. The building went silent. And underneath us, something knocked back. 3 slow knocks. The same rhythm. The same pause. Only this time, it wasn't coming from a door. It was coming from inside the walls.
Nobody spoke after the knocking stopped. Not because we were calm, because nobody knew what to say. There are moments when your brain refuses to accept information. It doesn't reject it. It simply places it somewhere else. A locked drawer. A place you promise yourself you will open later. The problem was that at Black Ridge, later never came. We left the storage room. Nobody suggested going down. Nobody suggested leaving. We just moved. That was the strange thing. The 3 of us had spent days trying to understand what was happening. Now that we were closer to an answer, none of us wanted it. Answers were supposed to make things better. At Black Ridge, every answer opened another door. Back in the control room, I replayed Daniel's recording. Again and again. Not the entire message, just one sentence. The observer keeps it alive. I kept thinking about that. Not controls it, not operates it, keeps it alive. Those words mattered because they suggested something I didn't want to consider. The station wasn't a machine waiting for instructions. It was something that needed someone. Marla sat across from me. She looked at the printer. "You know what Daniel asked me before he disappeared?" I looked up. No. He asked if I thought a place could remember. I waited. "What did you say?" I told him no. She looked down. I was wrong. Pete leaned against the wall. "You're saying the building remembers?" Marla shook her head. "I don't know." That answer would have annoyed me before. Now it was the only answer I trusted. I opened the old research files again. This time I searched for anything related to Project Horizon. Most of the documents were technical. Data models, equipment diagrams, communication studies. Then I found a section that had been blacked out. Not deleted, covered. Someone had physically hidden the words. I scanned the pages. The missing information wasn't about weather. It wasn't about prediction. It was about observation. The project wasn't designed to predict events. That was the mistake everyone made. The system was created to answer a different question, a question written at the top of the original research proposal. Can a system recognize human decisions before humans make them? I stopped reading, because suddenly the printer made more sense. Not the impossible parts, the purpose. The system wasn't looking into the future. It was studying choices, every decision, every reaction, every person who entered Black Ridge. The printer wasn't showing what would happen. It was showing what people were most likely to do. I looked at Pete. "You leaving wasn't random," he frowned. "What?" "The printer predicted you would try to leave. So it knew because it understood you." Pete stared at me. "That's worse." Yes, it was. Then I found the observer files, the ones nobody had shown me. 7 folders, 7 names, 7 people assigned to Black Ridge. Each file followed the same pattern. At first, curious. Then investigating. Then understanding. Then staying. The last pages were almost identical. Different handwriting, different years, same sentence. I thought I was studying the system. I didn't realize the system was studying me. The room became quiet because we all understood. The observers weren't selected because they were trapped. They were selected because they were useful. The station didn't need someone afraid. It needed someone who would keep searching. Someone who needed answers. Someone like me. Pete looked at me. "Ethan," I knew what he was going to ask. "Am I the reason this is happening?" I didn't answer immediately, because I didn't know. But the worst part was, I couldn't say no. At 1:40 a.m., I found Daniel's final file. Not a report, not a recording, not a video. The file date was the day he disappeared. The camera quality was terrible. Old security footage. Daniel was sitting in the control room, alone, talking to the camera. If this works, he stopped, looked away, started again. If Ethan Brooks is watching this, then I failed. I felt my hand tighten around the mouse. Daniel continued. The problem was never the printer. He looked directly into the camera. The problem was that we thought the printer was the beginning. He turned toward the control room window. "You need to understand something." A pause. "The station doesn't create predictions." Static interrupted the video. Then, "It creates replacements." The video distorted. Daniel disappeared for several seconds. When the image returned, he was closer to the camera. I don't know how. He hadn't moved. The chair hadn't moved. But suddenly his face filled the screen. "Ethan." His voice was almost a whisper. "Do not believe the first explanation." The video ended. Nobody moved. because the first explanation was exactly what we had believed. A research project, a prediction system, a machine. That was the first explanation, and Daniel was telling us it was wrong. I searched the files again. This time I looked for something different, not information, contradictions, and I found one. Project Horizon began in 1971. The printer was installed in 1972. But the first observer file was dated 1968, 3 years before the station existed. I opened it. The file contained one photograph, an old black and white image, a group of people standing outside a building. Not Black Ridge, a different location, but I recognized the structure, the same design, the same tower, the same entrance, the same station. At the bottom of the photograph was a handwritten note, first observation site location unknown. I looked at Marla. Where was this taken? She didn't answer, because she was staring at something else. The person standing in the photograph, the first observer, the man nobody knew about. It was Thomas Vane, the first observer. But that wasn't possible, because the photograph had a date, before Black Ridge existed, before Project Horizon existed, before anyone built the printer. The radio activated, not static, not Daniel, a new voice, an older voice, calm, patient. Observation has always existed. The three of us looked toward the control room window. The printer started printing. One final page. I walked over slowly. I didn't want to, but I knew I would, because that was the pattern. Curiosity, questions, answers, the same cycle. The page contained one sentence. Project Horizon was not created to study the observer. A second line appeared. It was created by the observer. I stopped breathing for a moment, because if that was true, then everything we believed was backwards. The researchers, the printer, the station, the experiment, none of it had created the observer. The observer had created all of it. Then the final line printed, and it changed everything. Thomas Vane was not the first observer. The printer clicked, the paper tray opened, a blank page waited, and slowly, one name began appearing. Not Ethan, not Pete, not Daniel, a name none of us recognized, a name from a person who had never worked at Black Ridge, a name from someone who was still alive. Marla Voss. Marla stared at the page. She didn't move. Not even a small reaction. No shock, no question, just silence. That was what scared me, because everyone else who saw their name on that printer reacted. Pete stepped back. I froze. Daniel left warnings everywhere. But Marla looked like someone who had been waiting for a door to open. You knew, Pete said it quietly. Marla didn't answer. Marla, still nothing. I picked up the page. The ink was still wet. The name was clear. Marla Voss. No time. No explanation. Just her name. How long? I asked. She looked at me. How long what? How long have you known your name would appear? Her eyes moved to the printer. I didn't know. Nobody believed her. Not even her. Then the fire alarm started. The sound cut through the room. Loud, sharp, wrong. Because Black Ridge had never used the alarm for anything normal. Every alarm here meant something. Every system had a reason. The control panel flashed. Fire detected level B. Pete looked at the screen. There's no fire system down there. I looked at Marla. Her face changed. This time she didn't hide it. What's down there? She didn't answer. The alarm continued. Smoke began coming through the ventilation system. Thin, grey, not enough to fill the room, just enough to prove it was real. The smell reached us seconds later. Burned plastic, old paper, something electrical. Pete grabbed the emergency extinguisher. We need to get out. I looked toward the level B door. The door was open. Smoke was coming from the staircase, not rising, coming upward slowly, like something below was breathing. The printer activated. Again. I almost ignored it. Almost. That was the problem with Black Ridge. It trained you. At first, every impossible thing demanded attention. After a while, impossible things became part of the routine. I called the printer, the voices, the doors, the warnings. You stopped asking if something could happen. You started asking what it wanted. The paper came out. A single sentence. Fire is not an emergency. Pete looked at it. Then what is it? The printer continued. Fire is removal. The smoke thickened. The archive room lights flickered, then went out. I grabbed my radio. Outside assistance? Static. No response. I tried again. The court at the station had cut us off. Again. Marla walked toward the archive room. I grabbed her arm. Where are you going? She looked at me. To save the files. Forget the files. She shook her head. No, her answer was immediate. Too immediate. Why? She looked at the smoke filling the hallway. Because that's what it wants. I froze. What? She pulled away. The fire isn't destroying the information. She looked at the printer. It's destroying the evidence. That sentence changed everything, because Marla wasn't thinking like someone trying to escape. She was thinking like someone protecting something. We ran to the archives. The smoke was thicker there. The old papers were already curling at the edges. Small flames moved along the bottom shelves, not spreading naturally, following a path, a line, a direction, straight toward the oldest files. Water system, Pete shouted. I ran to the control panel. Nothing. The sprinkler system didn't respond. The display showed an error. Manual override required. The manual control was inside the archive room, behind the burning shelves. Of course. Pete stared at the flames. What? Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Every problem at Black Ridge had been designed. Every solution was placed somewhere difficult. I moved toward the panel. The heat increased. The smoke burned my eyes. I could barely see, but I reached it. The switch was covered by a metal box, locked. I searched for the key. Nothing. Then I remembered. The old key. The one Marla was holding. I turned. She was standing near the files, holding the key, not moving. Marla! She looked at me. For a second, I thought she was going to give it to me. Instead, she looked at the burning shelves. I spent 20 years trying to understand this place. The flames reflected in her eyes. I thought if I learned enough, I could control it. I stepped closer. Marla. She looked back at me. I was wrong. The fire grew louder. The old records started falling. One shelf collapsed. Say something random. The impact shook the room. Behind it was something hidden. A metal door, small. Not level B, something else. Marla walked toward it. No, I grabbed her shoulder. She turned. You don't understand. No, I don't. Her voice dropped. That's the problem. She unlocked the metal door. Inside was a small compartment. No files, no equipment, just a recorder. An old tape recorder and a note. The note had one sentence, written decades ago. When the fire starts, do not save the records. Save the message. Marla picked up the recorder. Her hands were shaking now. Finally, after all this time, she was afraid. Pete pulled the fire alarm cover off the manual switch. Move. He hit the override. Nothing happened. He tried again. Nothing. Then the entire building shook. A deep mechanical sound came from below. The sprinkler system activated, but not in the archive. Every room upstairs began spraying water, except this one. The fire wasn't being stopped. It was being contained. Marla looked at the ceiling. It wants this room to burn. I looked at the flames. No, She looked at me. What? I held the recorder. It wants something inside this room gone. The recorder turned on by itself. No batteries, no button pressed. A voice played. Thomas Vane, the first observer. If you are hearing this, static, then the station has reached a transfer point. Marla stopped moving. Transfer, that word again. Thomas continued. The fire will remove the previous record. Pause. The new observer must not inherit the wrong story. The tape crackled. Then the voice became clearer. The greatest mistake was believing the observer was chosen. The flames moved closer. The tape continued. The observer is created. Nobody spoke, because that sentence was impossible, and yet it explained everything. The final part of the recording was almost a whisper. The station does not need someone to watch it. A pause. It needs someone who believes they discovered it. The recorder stopped. At the exact same moment, the fire went out. No smoke, no flames, no warning, just gone. The archive room was destroyed. The old files were ash. The evidence was gone. The only thing left was the recorder. Pete looked around. What now? Nobody answered, because we all knew what happened. The station had removed the evidence and left us with a story that could be true, or a story it wanted us to believe. Sai looked at Marla. She was staring at the burned shelves. What aren't you telling us? She didn't respond. Then the printer in the control room activated. For the first time, it printed something before anyone asked. A full page, a final report. Previous observer, Marla Voss. Status, failed. Reason, remembered too much. Below that, a new line appeared. Correction required. The lights shut off, the level B door opened, and from somewhere below, we heard Marla's voice, calling my name. Even though Marla was standing right beside me, I didn't move. Neither did Pete. Neither did Marla. Because all three of us heard the same thing. Her voice, coming from below, calling my name. Ethan, a pause. Then again, Ethan. The voice sounded exactly like Marla. Same tone, same tired way of saying my name. Same slight hesitation before the second syllable. That was what made it worse. If it had sounded strange, I could have dismissed it. A recording, a damaged speaker, a system malfunction. But it sounded real. Marla stepped toward the open level B door. No. Pete grabbed her arm. No. She looked at him. That is my voice, I know. Then let go. He didn't. For the first time since I met him, Pete looked like he wasn't trying to fix something. He was trying to prevent something. The printer page was still sitting on the desk. Previous observer. Marla Voss, status, failed, reason, remembered too much. I kept thinking about that last line. Remembered too much, not learned too much, not discovered too much. Remembered. Marla. She looked at me. What did you remember? Her face changed. A small movement. Almost nothing, but enough. She knew. I don't remember everything. That's not an answer. She looked down. When I started here, I thought I was new. The hallway lights flickered, but I wasn't. Pete released her arm. What does that mean? Marla stared into the darkness below. It means I had been here before. Nobody spoke. Pete, because there was no easy response. There was no normal version of that sentence. How? She shook her head. I don't know. You said you don't remember. I remember pieces. She touched the side of her head. Images. Of what? Level B. The building made another sound. A low vibration, like something deep underground had started moving. Marla continued. I found the room 20 years ago. When you started working here, she nodded. I thought I discovered something hidden. A bitter smile crossed her face. Just like everyone else. She told us she found the same things we found. The files, the photographs, the recordings, the warnings. Every observer reached the same point. They believed they were uncovering the truth, but every observer had one thing in common. They never questioned why they were able to find exactly what they needed. The station was guiding us, I said it quietly. Marla nodded. Yes. The printer clicked. Another page. I didn't want to look, but I did. It was a map. Not of Black Ridge. Not of Level B. A map of the entire mountain. There were several marked locations. Not one, not two, 7. Pete looked at it. Other stations? Marla shook her head. No. Then what? She pointed at the marks. Other observers. The locations formed a pattern, a circle around Black Ridge. Like the observatory wasn't the center. It was one point in something larger. I picked up the map. The paper was old, but the ink was new. Someone had marked the locations recently. At the bottom was a note. The first station failed. The second learned. The third remembered. There was no fourth line, only empty space, waiting. How many are there? Pete asked. Marla looked at me. I don't know. That answer bothered me less now, because I understood something. Not knowing was becoming part of the design. We decided to go down, not because we wanted to, because staying upstairs was no longer safer. The fire had proved that. The station was changing, closing doors. Say something, opening others. Removing information. If we didn't understand what was happening, we were just reacting. And Black Ridge was always ahead of people who reacted. The staircase was colder than the rest of the building. The temperature dropped with every step. The walls were covered with notes. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Some were warnings, some were observations, some were just names. At the bottom, we found a hallway. That should not have existed. The dimensions were wrong. The station above us was not large enough to contain it. The hallway stretched farther than the building should allow. Pete stopped. How is this possible? I looked at the walls. I didn't answer, because I had stopped expecting normal explanations. The first door had a name written on it, Thomas Vane. The second, Daniel Mercer. The third, Marla Voss. Marla didn't move, because the fourth door had my name, Ethan Brooks. Nobody touched it, not yet. We continued. At the end of the hallway was one final door. No name, no label, only a small window. Inside was a room, a control room, but not the one upstairs, an older one, the first one, the original, and sitting in front of the equipment was a man. For a second, I thought it was Daniel. The same posture, the same jacket, the same tired way of sitting. Then he turned. Not Daniel, older, much older. He looked at me and smiled. Not because he was happy, because he recognized me. Ethan Brooks. My mouth went dry. Who are you? The man looked toward the equipment. That depends. On what? Which time you remember? Pete moved forward. Where are we? The man ignored him. He kept looking at me. You finally made it. I stepped closer. Made it where? He looked around the room, to the beginning. I wanted answers. I wanted to ask everything. Who built the station? What was Level B? Why did the printer know my name? But one question came out first. Are you Thomas Vane? The man smiled slightly. That is the name I used here. Used, not was, not am. Used, Marla whispered, Who are you? The man looked at her, and his expression changed. Not fear, sadness. You still remember too much. Marla took a step back. Remember what? He looked at her. The first time, the lights in the room flickered. The old monitors turned on, one by one. Each screen showed a different year. And now, every screen showed Black Ridge.
Every screen showed an observer. Every screen showed the same moment, the moment they discovered the truth. Then the final monitor turned on. It showed the current room. It showed us, but from a different angle. A camera behind the equipment. A camera that had never existed. And in the image, there was someone standing behind me. I turned around. Nobody was there. I looked back at the monitor. The person was gone. But a message had appeared on the screen. Not printed, not written, typed. You are looking for the person who started this. Not printed, a second line appeared. You should be looking for the person who ends it. The man in the chair looked at me. You have one choice left. I stared at him. What choice? He pointed toward the final door behind him. The door without a name. You can learn why the station exists. A pause. Or you can learn why you were sent here. The door unlocked. And from inside, something different listening to US. I heard my own voice. Not a recording, not a transmission, not a startle, my voice, speaking from the other side. Ethan, a pause. Don't open this. The man looked at me. Now you understand. I stared at the door because for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what was behind it. I was afraid of who was waiting for me.
I didn't open the door. Not immediately. For the first time since arriving at Black Ridge, I stopped myself from chasing an answer. That was new. Every other time, curiosity had won. The printer printed a name, I investigated. A file appeared, I opened it. A door unlocked, I walked through. That was the pattern, and I was finally starting to understand something. The station wasn't forcing me, it was letting me choose. The man in the chair watched me. You learned faster than the others. I kept my eyes on the door. Who are you? He looked down at his hands. I told you. No. I shook my head. You told me a name. The room stayed quiet. Then he nodded. Fair enough. He stood, slowly. The movement was ordinary, human. That almost made it worse. After everything I had seen, I expected something impossible, something that would prove this wasn't real. Instead, he looked like an exhausted old man who had spent too many years underground. My name is Thomas Vane. I watched him carefully. You're the first observer. He smiled. That's what the files say. Is it true? He looked at the old equipment around us. Most of the time, the first answer is the one people remember. I hated that answer, because it sounded exactly like Black Ridge, half-truths, answers that created more questions. Then tell me the whole truth. Thomas looked at me. The whole truth is that there isn't one version. That makes no sense. Thomas looked at him. It will. He pointed at the monitors. You keep thinking this place predicts events. He looked at me. You finally understand it doesn't. The screens changed. The old recordings disappeared. Now they showed people. Observers. All of them. Every person who had entered Black Ridge. Every person who had searched. Every person who had stayed. The station studies choices, but not because it wants to know what people will do. He looked at the screens. It wants to know what people become. I looked at the images. Daniel, Marla, others I didn't know. Each one changed over time. They became quieter, more isolated, more focused, until eventually, they all looked the same. Observers. Thomas nodded. Exactly. I looked at him. Why? He didn't answer immediately. That hesitation bothered me, because it was the first time he seemed unsure. Because something was already here. The room went quiet. Something? Thomas looked toward the floor. Before the station. I felt the answer coming. The kind of answer that changes everything. The kind you can't take back. The research project wasn't created to study a machine, Thomas said. It was created because people noticed something happening. Where? Here. He touched the wall, under the mountain. The printer upstairs, the predictions, the observers, all of it. A reaction. Not the beginning. What is it? Thomas looked at me. I don't know. That answer surprised me. You don't know? No. He walked toward the monitors. I spent my entire life trying to understand it. He looked back. The mistake was believing understanding was the goal. What is the goal? His eyes moved to me. Survival. The lights flickered. The room shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Something below us moved. Not the building. The mountain. What happens if he leaves? Thomas looked at her. He can't. Why? Because he already decided. I looked at him. What does that mean? Thomas pointed at the door. The person behind that door. My stomach tightened. Who is it? Thomas didn't answer. Because the door opened. The person standing there was me. Older. Not decades older, just older enough. A few years. Same face, same eyes, different expression. A version of me who looked like he hadn't slept in a long time.
Nobody spoke, because there was no explanation that could make sense. The older Ethan looked at me. Don't listen to him. I looked between them. Who? The older version of me pointed at Thomas. He wants you to think you have a choice. Thomas looked at him. You know that's not true. Older Ethan laughed quietly. No. He looked at me. I know exactly what happens. I stepped back. What happens? Older Ethan looked at the room. Every observer thinks they are the one who will end it. A pause. They aren't. The printer upstairs started running. Even from below, we heard it. Pages moving, one after another. Thomas looked at me. Ask yourself one question. I stared at him. What? Why did the printer show you the future? I didn't answer. Because suddenly I understood. It wasn't showing me what would happen. It was showing me what I would become. Older Ethan stepped closer. You think you're here to stop this? His voice lowered. But that's what every observer thinks. The room went silent. Then he said the sentence that broke everything I believed. I was sent here too. I looked at him. By who? He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Thomas, then at Marla, then at Pete. By you. Nobody moved. The meaning took a few seconds to reach me, not because I didn't understand the words, because I did. Older Ethan continued. The message you heard on the radio, my own warning, that was me. The document with your signature, me. The photograph, me. I felt cold, not from the room, from the realization. I caused this. Older Ethan shook his head. No. He stepped closer. You continued it. The mountain shook again. The monitors all went black, except one, the final screen. It showed a camera view of the control room upstairs. The printer, the same printer, still running. A page came out. Even from the screen, I could see the words. Thomas walked closer. No. For the first time, he sounded afraid. The page finished. The camera zoomed in. The message appeared. Final observation complete. Below it, observer identified. Then the final line. Observer Ethan Brooks. Thomas stared at the screen. Older Ethan closed his eyes. Marla whispered, no. I looked at the printer feed. Another page started printing. The final page. The one nobody wanted. The first line appeared. Purpose of observation. The second line appeared. To determine whether humanity can replace itself. The third line appeared. Result. Successful. The printer stopped. The mountain went silent, and I realized the worst part. The station had never been trying to keep an observer inside. It had been trying to create one, and it had finally succeeded.
Nobody moved. After the printer stopped, the silence felt complete. Not empty, finished. Like the station had been waiting years to say those last 3 words. Result? Successful. I looked at Thomas. He wasn't watching me anymore. He was watching the floor, almost with relief. You knew. He nodded once. I hoped I was wrong. You said I had a choice. I did. What choice? His answer came quietly. What kind of observer you became. He had the face of someone who would explain the same thing too many times. I fought it, he said. I tried leaving. I burned the files. I destroyed the printer. I sealed level B. He smiled without humor. You've already seen how well that worked. I looked at Pete. He hadn't said a word in minutes. He was staring at me. Not with fear, with disappointment. The kind that hurts more. You knew, he said. I frowned. I don't think you realized it. He pointed toward the printer feed on the monitor. But every time it gave you a choice, he swallowed. You picked the answer it wanted. He was right. I could blame the station, the recordings, the hidden files, the impossible photographs. But every door I opened myself. Every page I read, I chose to read. No one had forced my hand. The station had only learned what kind of person I was. A man who couldn't leave a question unanswered. I finally understood why Daniel had left warnings instead of explanations. Because explanations become instructions. Warnings leave room to turn back. I looked at the older version of myself. Can this end? He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. Yes. Hope lasted less than a second. It just doesn't end the way you want. Thomas walked to the oldest control panel. It wasn't connected to the printer. Not anymore. It had one switch, covered by a cracked piece of glass. This was installed before everything else. He rested his hand on it. The researchers believed destroying the observation point would stop the process. Did it? No. What happened? They destroyed the building. He looked around. The observation remained. That was the last piece. Black Ridge wasn't the source. It never had been. The station was only a lens, a place built around something nobody understood. The printer wasn't creating the phenomenon. It was translating it, turning choices into paper, giving people the illusion that they could understand what couldn't be measured. The room shook one final time. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Cracks spread across the old concrete. Thomas looked up. It knows. What? That you've stopped asking the wrong questions. The older me stepped closer. You have one thing I didn't. What? You still have Pete. I turned. Pete was already looking at me. He understood before I spoke. No. His voice was firm. No. I nodded anyway. If I stay, he interrupted. I'm not leaving you here. You have to. Ethan, you have to. For the first time since I arrived, I wasn't trying to solve the station. I was trying to stop it from learning someone else. The observer wasn't trapped because the mountain demanded it. The observer stayed because leaving meant handing the burden to another person. Every replacement was an act of hope. Every observer believed the next one would succeed where they had failed. That belief was the trap. I took Pete's truck keys from the table where he dropped them earlier and pressed them into his hand. You know the service road on the East Ridge? He frowned. It disappeared. It disappeared on the cameras. I looked at him. We never checked with our own eyes. He stared at me. You think it's there? I think the station wanted us to believe it wasn't. Marla finally spoke. Her voice was almost gone. I'll go with him. What about you? She smiled for the first time since I'd met her. A small, tired smile. I remembered too much. She looked toward the staircase. I don't think it needs me anymore. Older Ethan stepped back into the unnamed room. His outline seemed thinner, less solid, like a reflection fading from glass. He met my eyes one last time. Don't spend your life trying to understand it. What should I do? He answered with the only advice that mattered. Watch the weather. Not with light. Not with noise. I blinked. The room behind him was empty. Thomas opened the cracked glass cover over the old switch. He didn't touch it. Instead, he looked at me. It belongs to the observer. I understood. Not because the station told me, because I had finally stopped looking for certainty. Some decisions don't come with proof, only responsibility. I pulled the switch. Nothing exploded. No blinding light. No roar beneath the mountain. The old control room simply lost power. One monitor at a time. One light after another. Until only the emergency lamp above the exit remained. Upstairs, somewhere far above us, I heard the printer stop. Not pause, stop. For good. Or so I believed. We climbed the stairs in silence. The walls were still covered in names, but something had changed. The fresh ink beside mine had faded. The notes looked old again, like they had been waiting years to become ordinary. The control room was dark. The printer sat where it always had, cold. I opened the front panel. No wiring, no circuit boards, no motor. The inside was empty, as if there had never been a machine at all. Pete looked over my shoulder. "What is it?" I closed the cover. "I don't know." And for the first time, that answer didn't bother me. Dawn reached Black Ridge as we stepped outside. The mountain looked exactly the way it had on my first morning. Wind across the snow. Clouds drifting over the ridge. Nothing impossible, nothing waiting. Just another weather station. The service road was there, exactly where it had always been, covered in fresh snow. No broken pavement, no missing stretch, just a road. Pete looked at me. Neither of us said a word. He and Marla climbed into the truck. The engine started on the first try. He waited, giving me one last chance. I shook my head. He drove away. This time the road didn't disappear. I watched until the truck became a small dark shape against the white mountain. I stayed long enough to lock the observatory. I mailed my resignation a week later. No one ever answered. The contractor that hired me never existed. The payroll records listed no employer. Officially, I had never worked at Black Ridge. Within a year, the observatory was abandoned. Weather satellites had made it obsolete. The building still stands, but no one is assigned there anymore. At least, that's what the records say. People ask me why I still check the forecast every night. I tell them it's a habit from working in the mountains. That's easier than telling the truth. Because sometimes, just before 2:27 in the morning, every digital clock in my house freezes for exactly 11 seconds.
No voices come over the radio. Nothing moves. Then the clocks continue as if nothing happened. I've learned to let those 11 seconds pass. I don't investigate. I don't write anything down. I don't ask questions. But 3 months ago, after a thunderstorm knocked out the power in my neighborhood, I found a single sheet of paper lying on the floor beside my front door. It wasn't warm. It wasn't old. It looked like it had come from an ordinary office printer. There was no logo, no address, no explanation. Just one weather forecast. Clear skies, light wind, visibility excellent. At the bottom, in handwriting I recognized as my own, were 6 words. Observation continues. No replacement required. I folded the page and locked it away. I have never shown it to anyone, except now, because there's one detail I never managed to explain. Not the printer, not level B, not the mountain. When Pete reached the nearest town that morning, he called me from a gas station. He wanted to make sure I was alive. Before he said hello, he asked me one question. He said, "Who's the man standing behind you?"